what does that mean for us, right? What does that mean? Do they go immediately? Does all clothing immediately go to a place and get sorted? Does it get sorted right there? Stuff end up on the shelves, get shipped? Are we going to see more bin stuff where the sorting is done by you? I mean, that's why you're paying so little. You're doing their job for them, right? You roll out the bins and you guys sort it out. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commonwealth. Flipper, welcome to the Commonwealth. Kevin, we've got a lot going on around here. A lot of stuff you'll see in the next few videos, but we also have some things that just been hitting me in the face, like Goodwill stuff. And my wife went back to Goodwill, so she's got a little update on that. And I even went into Goodwill not too long ago, but I don't have kind things always to say about Goodwill, and I don't have kind things to say about my last trip. However, there's two other topics I want to talk about in regards to Goodwill. One of them, I got to do a mea culpa and say they're doing one thing right, and I want to talk about that and some, I don't know if they're disturbing trends, maybe they're good trends, but they might not necessarily be good for resellers going on with the Goodwill. Let's talk about it. My wife told me she's going to be coming down in a minute, but I'm going to pick some items up until then. I was going to film a fairly large what sold video today because I had yesterday's sales and a bunch that came in today. I was going to go through all of them, but then a bunch more came in today, and I'm like, you know, forget it. I'll just film what I have to do today. I'll do an extra video tomorrow. It'll give me one more day off somewhere in the future when I want to take a day, which is actually something I'm thinking about doing here as we're in Q4. And it gets crazy, and there's a lot of loose ends that needed tied up before I keep pushing, you know, because I don't like things to fall through the cracks. Because if it's a customer service thing or something like that, you know, I like to keep a pretty good name. So I sometimes take a day off of reselling, close the store down for 2 days, because it doesn't really affect sales the way I do 2-day shipping, and take one full day and just take care of all the loose ends, reorganize, straighten things up. It creates some sanity, and I find that I'm more productive in the future. So I'm probably going to do that. I guess I'm yapping already. So I'll start with my mea culpa to Goodwill on this. And the one story that came to me today that I saw, I thought this is good. So the Goodwill Industries down there in Western North Carolina, they actually are issuing vouchers to people, you know, as winter's approaching and some folks need things. They've had everything that's lost. They are in certain centers, I think in Winston-Salem, which is away from there, but in Boone itself, at these centers, they're providing certain services, you know, bringing in donations from the outside that might be especially useful right then, issuing vouchers to different people at those sites. It's not something that is their mission, right? That's the big misunderstanding with them. It's job training and all that. But when I read that, I said, hey, you know, Goodwill's doing the right thing here. And I'm really, you know, a lot of times I'm very critical of, you know, what their mission is versus what the optics are, what you actually see them doing. And we're going to get into a little bit of that later. But in this case, I think they're doing the right thing. All right, y'all, I gave my wife permission to go back to Goodwill. She was so excited.
You don't give me permission. I go to Goodwill.
Anyway, but I actually encouraged her because we were low on merchandise.
And I got like all this stuff for the kids too, so it was good.
Oh my gosh! So you spent more money than we're gonna make.
No, kids' clothes are $2.99, and I got a cat toy
for the dogs.
$8.
All right. Well, hey, it's cheaper than that for Turner. Anyway, so would you say that the Goodwill price? Well, you told me $7.99 for jeans. That's an increase around here.
Yeah, and they're in Lynchburg. I think it was an increase on one place of the shirts. I mean, yeah, that's $4.99, but yesterday the one on Wards Road was, I think, $5-something, like $5.95 for shirts.
Are you seeing like a lot of more individually priced shirts are all different prices, or are they all?
Well, they did the thing like where the t-shirts are cheaper at least.
Okay.
So that's okay.
Okay.
But
so,
jeans suck. Kids' clothes are still.
Let us know. We're gonna have you go over this, but let us know in your area if you're watching in the comments. Are you seeing nothing but individually priced in your area has been going on for years, or are you seeing everything?
Can't find shoes. All the shoes
are all individually. Yeah, that used to be the one benefit of shoes. We don't hardly ever find shoes around here, but when we did find them, they were all the same price. That is long since passed, and their pricing is out of the market. But you did okay. You found some stuff.
Yeah, I found some stuff this time.
Okay,
which I
what do you want to start with? This to me, it's like I want to keep it. Ask Xandar because the box is just perfect, other than the Goodwill sticker.
I mean, it's tiny. tiny bit, but
that's a really
this
good
is
condition
what,
box for that.
1992. So for 1992, yeah.
And
I mean, it had everything. It is missing one tiny little gemstone. There's 20 gemstone, and this has 19, which I think is why they put a bead in there. But it had all the parts, everything
99%
else.
complete.
Yeah, and I feel like you could put 99% complete because it is 99% complete. And he's good, and the battery compartment was fine, so I haven't tested it, but I'm
probably not a piece or outer. Probably not part or outer. Probably sell it all together.
No, but people do piece them out if you find it. Like the gemstones went for $10.
How much was it?
$8.
$8. So how much do you think? 40, 50? In that condition, I bet it's the best condition one out there. One other,
I'm gonna say
other than new.
$50 range.
$50 range.
Yeah.
Okay, so 8 into 50. I wouldn't pay. Would I pay?
It's not super heavy, so it's not like. I mean, I know that's a pain to ship, but it's not heavy.
Yep. This is just. I love this. Yeah, this is.
Buc-ee's. You can't like pass up Buc-ee's, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I don't want to buy it because it's $3.99, but they sell for $25 to $30.
Yeah. Well.
The Valentine's plush in September, so like. Not just Valentine's Day.
The days of 50-cent plus. Remember that? Every bit, the whole bin, 50 cents.
I will say they did have, like, cheap.
They had some that were cheap. Okay. I'm feeling like there's a leveling off, and that kind of ties into what I want to talk about later in the video a little bit. But
they gave me this because it didn't have a sticker on it.
They gave it to you because
like
it didn't have
I was checking out, and it literally was probably like 2 minutes past closing time, and the dude just.
So they never do that. A lot of times.
One sold for like $12.99. It's just a pencil case, but the.
I hear a lot of folks will say if there's no price on it anymore, you can't even buy it that day. It goes back in circulation with a sticker. This guy did not care. Because all the thieves out there.
Then this, they have some,
Not Barbie.
Not Barbie. Pink, just pink Corvette. I couldn't pass it up because usually this, I'm like, I can't believe they stuck $1.99 on this.
Good condition.
Yeah. So.
I like it. We've sold these in the past.
Yeah, these are about $15 to $17 range. Pampered Chef,
Put them
wet,
together.
Dry. Yeah, I will sell them together.
What are they, like $1.99?
$3.99.
$3.99. Yeah, okay, there's a little bit of money.
I know. I probably should have bought this, but I did. These are old vintage Mary Kay. Like, it's got the... This is what they did the little parties with. It has a little individual mirror. I can't open it, whatever. So I'll lock those up.
What do they got? $15?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the soccer jersey.
And how much
so that was $4.99 in the shirts, but...
How much did it go for?
That's in the $30 to $40
really?
range too. Yeah, so with they had some made that just have the 15 on the front and not her name on the back. So the ones with the name and number on the back go for more.
Well, that's not
and
bad.
It's a medium, which it looks
Dry
tiny,
fit.
but yeah, of course, the larger the sizes.
All right, what's your favorite? Like, if you could have only bought one, which one would you have bought for the resale value?
I mean, the plush is the easiest,
I think so.
obviously.
$3.99 to $25.
The thing they gave is cool.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
just targeted shipping and everything. But yeah, Valentine's Day, that'll sell for $30 is my guess. I love it. That's cool too. That's just my kind of stuff. I go on dibdit.com. Matter of fact, we're going to make this deal of the day on dibdit.com.
There you go.
What does it sell for on eBay? $10?
Yeah, it was like $10, $12.
We're going to sell it
for free. I was like
$5. There, she's going to make money off of you.
All right.
You can thank her for deal of the day.
Thanks for letting me go to Goodwill.
All right, she told me she'll be done in just a second. We'll talk to her. And then there's this other article. There's two other articles that I want to talk about that I think things are shifting a little bit for Goodwill. And I'll leave it up to you if it's a good news or bad news scenario for you thrifters out there. And yes, I realize before I start getting all the hate, Goodwills are very different everywhere. I'm looking for a washcloth. There it is right there. And everybody's different region is very, very different. So I'm speaking more about what's going on here than anywhere else. But one of these stories is a national story. I was at a yard sale right down the road, which doesn't happen often because we live out in the sticks. And I saw this sitting there. I think they wanted like $3 for it. And I'm like, ugh. Because it's so cool. It's a vintage Empire Strikes Back Yoda washcloth in good condition. I'm like, that thing is awesome. I wanted it, knowing it wouldn't sell for much, but I wanted it. And so I said, I'll give you $2 for it. And it didn't sell for much, $9.45 plus shipping. But I'm still glad I bought it. It's about a $5 profit in there. I figured if nothing else, I could pass it on to somebody, a Star Wars collector on Dibdit for $4 or $5 on a live auction or something and basically break even. But I ended up selling it on eBay and making a little bit of money. You know, after my wife comes in, when we get to these other topics, one of the things I said the other day in a video was that you really need to source down a little bit here. You got to be cheap. I know that's tough and people hate me for it when I'm out there garage selling. But you know what? The people that are selling stuff on eBay right now are putting out slightly better deals. And so the amount you used to get for stuff or the sold comps, you know, you got to be there or be below it. And I think that's starting to trickle through. When you're in a free market, that affects all phases of it. Not just if the end buyer changes their habits, the middleman and the beginning source, all that has to change. And I think that's a little bit of what we'll talk about with Goodwill. Sold some moccasins. I don't think I've ever sold moccasins. I've been selling for darn near 25 years. Never sold a pair of moccasins, but these sold, not for amazing money, but still a decent little profit because of what we paid, $19.95 plus shipping. Speaking of selling cheaper on eBay, you got to source cheaper. I did with this one, and this was kind of lucky. I pulled up to this. I was dropping Turner off at a baseball, well, I was watching him, but I knew they got to get there an hour before the game starts. And I was like, there's a little tiny flea market. I usually don't do well. It was in Martinsville. And I went down there and I found these tables, and there was 5 tables of this flea market, and it was all terrible. And then I looked at this lady's table, I almost walked away, and she pulled this out of her car. She's like, do you know what this is? And I saw Bose. I'm like, no, I don't know what it is. What do you want for it? And I didn't know what it was, but it said Bose on it. She said $2, and I bought it. And it's a wall mount kit. And I looked it up when I got back to the car, and it sells for $50. And that's what we got for it. $49.95 for this, plus shipping. And then we'll get into the national topic, regional topics as well, and related to what we're talking about today. This was another good buy. It was a yard sale, and I found more expensive yard sales than I've ever found this year, more than other years. And this guy wanted $5 for all his hats. And I was like, $5 for hats. I almost walked away, but then I saw this one, because they weren't great. I saw this one, and it's Pinehurst, the Centennial Pinehurst. And it was a rope hat, and it's got a leather strap on it. And I was like, this might be good. Made in USA, and I looked it up, and similars are selling for $50. I listed it for $49.95. Somebody sent me an offer for $45. And I said, okay. Actually, it sold for $49.95. I couldn't send them an offer. They sent me a message. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. That's really cool. The iconic logo for Pinehurst. And they asked me if I'd send them a $5 refund if they bought it for full price. And I said, sure, absolutely, definitely. So that was good. 5 into 45 for a hat plus shipping. All right, Reagan has some thank yous. We're not going to start thank yous yet for these, even though people have started to purchase them. So thank you very, very much. They will go quickly there on CommonwealthPair.com and on Dibit.com. Who are you thanking today? These are Blacklight thank yous.
Flippin' Hot Finds, Robert, Bill, Butcher Treasure, Geraldine, Ginger Picker, and Jody. And they all got black lights.
All right, thank you, Reagan.
Bye, and don't forget to get your stickers at CommonwealthPickers.com.
Sold a Dorothy Wizard of Oz costume dress for a kid. And hey, better late than never, all right? Gotta sell it. And I don't know where we got this. I wouldn't have paid more than $1 for it. It might have been Reagan's when she was little, and my wife dug it out and listed it. I'm not sure. So $15 plus shipping. Starting to see light at the end of the tunnel at the boot bin back here, which is really good. I love selling this stuff in the fall. Well, I don't love selling it, but I like it when it sells in the fall. And these boots we've actually had a while. See what I mean? There's a little bit of space in there now. Those are the boot boots. And that's good. I'm happy. $5, I believe, is what I paid for these. I remember the sale. It was over a year ago. I don't think they've been listed that long, but they did sell for $34.95. Didn't even do any cleanup on them. Chernock would not be proud of me. You know, he'd buff that out and make it all good and put some stuff on it. And I didn't, but it still sold. $34.95 plus shipping. Look at these two out here on the porch, sunbathing. What is your Goodwill like in your region lately? Is it still amazing? Is it still terrible? Or is everything individually priced? I told you, one thing I noticed when I went in there the other day with my wife, and this was a couple weeks back, was that the Goodwill, the big one in the nearest city over here, that one had stopped sorting clothes in any recognizable way other than size. And that, you know, a lot of them, you know, by color and doing all kinds of stuff and by style. And they used to do all that. And I'm like, man, how labor intensive is that? Is it worth it? And I think there's a little value to it, but probably not as much value to it as the labor costs that are involved with it. I think there are, and that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. I think there are some significant challenges that Goodwills are having. It's resulting in closures for some as well, and I've seen that. Pepper's in here. I don't like you back here. Come on. Come on. You get into trouble back here. You stay out here. There you go. And this is an old pair of American Eagle jeans. It wasn't the best one to pick up, but, you know, hey, one of those 5 fill a bag for $5 ones. And the size and everything, but it still sold, but it took forever, and it sold on discount, and it sold for $13.96 plus shipping. Speaking of something I've had for a while, these ports. This was a $1 sale, and there was nothing to buy, but I saw this, and I'm like, yeah, this might work. And this is what it is right here: MST USB-C HD TV multifunction adapter. Picked it up for $1, sold for $15 plus shipping. You may remember me talking about these hoodies that I had listed, and they sold really quickly. I got them in Vegas, I think, at a Vegas event. I bought tons of this stuff. And then they just stopped selling, so I decided to delist it, sell similar, and they started selling again. But when I listed it for a couple dollars cheaper. The market just wasn't quite there. Maybe it was the season, that's why they stopped selling. Now it's selling because it's the right season for hoodies. This is a Nike size large, and I think I got $14. I paid $2 a piece and bought a whole bunch of Nike stuff with tags, and a lot of it has sold, but these didn't. I think it's a youth size large. $14 plus shipping. It's actually $13 plus shipping for those. So I used to have them listed for $14.95. Now they're $12.95. So like I said, I dropped the price down on them, and they started to sell, so I'm okay with it. We've talked about Goodwill closings before. We talked about it in regards to some Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest. And 2 of the Goodwills up there closed because of theft, which I think is odd, but maybe telling. I don't know. So I've talked a little bit around here. I'll explain a little bit more. There's been reduction in size of some of the Goodwills. Our Goodwill right here in town is half the size it used to be, but the receiving area is the same size as it's ever been. And so to me, that's telling, right? They're bringing it in, and this will tie into the national picture in a minute, and processing it, and it's not all going in this store. There's no way it's all going in that store, because that store down there has just got so much junk in it. And it's got a lot of like dollar store stuff. Like the whole left side of the store is that. Like, man, I miss my old Goodwill. But there's been 2 closures. One just happened about a month or so ago, about 45 minutes to the south of here. Rural area ones have closed. And I don't know why. I'm not going to pretend to know why, but my guess is that the price that they have to pay in leases and space and all that isn't making them the money, because they've had to raise their prices, and people aren't going to pay prices. I mean, sometimes it's over Walmart prices. So the cost of doing business for some of these areas, they've had to consolidate. They've made these massive Goodwills and closed other ones down, but they've kept some open because they're bringing in stuff. And there's no way where that Goodwill is located, they're bringing in enough stuff to fill this massive Goodwill. My thought is they're keeping these, they're reducing sizes, reducing their leases and their cost of doing business, and keeping them open as donation centers and sending them to one place. It's much more cost effective. That's my guess. But at some point, and you started to see this, you know, the buyer is not going to buy as much. And I think they're seeing that as well. So they're having to do things. And it seems to me that there have been a few more deals on certain things. Not on all things. In just the last 2 times I've been. I don't see it being a huge change. I actually see some things on the horizon that are probably bad for thrifters. Like, I'm not going to say like me. I'm a thrifter, but I like to thrift at garage sales. We'll tie it into the bigger picture in a minute. And yes, I'm very well aware that Goodwill gets all of its stuff for free. And that should be a huge advantage, but they still have to deal with a lot of the other stuff that every other retail store has to deal with. It's a weird sale. You know, labor costs and whatever, although that's probably reduced too, but I'm not getting into that. These things right here, they were free to me, which is why I decided to list them. But Dallas ware, like cafeteria food trays, these, believe it or not, sold. I have a ton of them in there. I should have sold them on Shop Commons, I think, because I got a bunch. But we decided to list one over here, see what happened. And a lot of 7 of them sold for $19 plus shipping. I don't know if that's worth it, but just made some money on it. Seems like a day doesn't go by without selling some fall type stuff. Carhartt's been selling good for us lately. We're into these for about $3 a piece. This one sold for $20 plus shipping. You know, I got some messages. Well, I didn't get messages. Once I got those few little updates and I saw my news stories, you know how they feed you stuff on social media that you're interested in, and apparently I'm interested in Goodwill. I saw a couple stories in Texas closing down different Goodwills and different, you know, movements of consolidation and things like that. I saw a story of one opening. I pulled it up on my phone here. A ribbon cutting for this new Goodwill, but it was in a story that was about the demise of thrift stores because of leases and because of lack of sales. And I don't know, maybe it's me. I guarantee you there's less people. At least they are in mine. I used to go into the Goodwill here when it was good, and there would be a line of 5 people checking out. Now I can't even find a person to check me out. So I guarantee you they are losing sales because their prices have gone up to that much. Now maybe that's intended because they can have less employees, you know, because there's less people in there and they can raise the prices, make the same amount of money. I don't know. I don't see how it's a good thing. I really don't. But in this story, it was because Goodwill was opening up because of the other thrift stores. DAVs were closing down in this location. There was 2 private thrift stores that had closed down, and Goodwill purchased the properties. I'm like, And by the way, Goodwill does that. They purchase the properties, which, by the way, has been a huge part of their income because they've been doing that for years, as opposed to leasing all the time. And when property values go up, you know, they can survive because they own the dang thing. But that's another story. And that's all individual based on whichever area you're in. Everybody, all these different Goodwills operate differently. And I'm going to do a couple more things here and then look at a national picture about what Goodwill was investing in, a $2 million investment in something that might affect us a little bit. I think I sold my very last large of the Nike dry fit tees in this bundle right here. Man, I left the door open. There's 2 flies in here. It's such a nice day out there, though. I figured I had to. Look at that. We've sold 2/3 of those dry fits that we paid a little over $1 for. And we've been selling them for anywhere between $20, and this one went out on discount for $14. I think that's right, actually. It is the last large. We still have mediums in there and smalls. $13.96 plus shipping. And that's the lowest profit margin we've had, $1 and a $13.96 on those shirts. And we're okay with that. All right, I'll just forewarn you here. I could talk about this stuff forever. I'm going to try to stay out of the weeds, but inevitably I won't here. Goodwill Industries launches $2 million textile recycling project at first sustainability summit. On a side note before I start, and I got to read through all the, you know, the CEO makes $10 million a year, and I looked it up. Steve Preston is the CEO. I've read articles about him before. It looks like a fine guy. And he makes $632,000 a year. So spare me the $10 million thing that I see all the time. But that's neither here nor there. I'm going to read a little bit of it, and then I'm going to pick snippets, because I think there's 2 parts of this that really do affect the little guy reseller out there. And a lot of it, you got to read between the lines. There are some issues, you know, well, let me read the first part. We are quickly entering the age of regulation, period. That scared me to read that right off the bat. That, to me, is the biggest enemy of resellers, small-time resellers. And I've talked about it before. I'm not going to go at length about it right here. And as we arrive at this destination, it is imperative that we do so well prepared and with tangible next steps to ensure effective execution. Because of the age of regulation. Let's hope we're not. But I think you might be right. That was the mindset of those who took part in last week's 2-day Goodwill Sustainability Summit in Washington, D.C. No accident, by the way. Where both private and nonprofit industry leaders, recyclers, and researchers came together to discuss what exactly needs to happen in order to arrive at a regulated and sustainable future together. So I already have concerns here. Not about sustainability, but the fact that it's the regulations that are going to force the sustainability, which opens the door for big moneyed interests to get into this in order to, look, I've said this before, I'll say it again because it's true. Do you think that these big companies who are manufacturing clothing and putting it out, do you think they want their goods to be sold on the secondhand market for far less? They don't. They don't. Some may say that, and you've even seen this. they've been doing it themselves, buyback and doing it themselves because there's money in it. We know there's money in it because we do it all. I mean, look at this. We do it all the time. And I hesitate to give this analogy, but I'm going to do it because I think it'll explain my point a little bit. It was no accident that Walmart supported the Affordable Care Act. No accident, right? If you would think the excess stuff being heaped onto somebody like Walmart for having to provide all this health care and do this stuff for their employees, they sign on to it and they're excited about it. And the reason, and we've seen it, if you go to Walmart, there's less and less employees at Walmart, for goodness sake. I mean, my wife's like, the self-checkout aisle, it said, half of them said 15 items or less, and she looks around, she's like, there's nobody at a regular register. They don't want to have more employees because of this stuff. However, what they do have is capital, and small businesses up and coming will be suppressed by these limitations put in place by regulations and new laws. And so it gives them a bit of a monopoly, if you will. This is not political commentary. I know it's political season, but it's making the point that regulation isn't always pushed back on by big businesses because it limits the growth or possibility of growth of small businesses and it protects their markets. Now, at the same time, they don't want over-regulation that really cuts into their bottom line, but that's the template I'm looking at right here. So I'm going to keep reading here. The event, therefore, provided Goodwill with a platform to share the findings of Textile Circulatory Pilot Project that it has run for 2 years. The $1.28 million initiative funded by the Walmart Foundation and initiated by Goodwill Industries set out to develop skills, systems, infrastructure to aggregate, sort, and prepare textiles for reuse and recycling across the Goodwill network. None of this is a bad thing. What scares me is the first statement right here, where it's regulation is coming. Listen, if Goodwill sets this stuff up and they're the infrastructure for it, they will welcome the regulation. Because everybody will have to be, be some kind of a thing where, if you produce this, you have to, whether it's offsets or whatever all this nonsense is. Sorry. That's the way I feel. They want to profit off of the regulation, and there's plenty of companies who do. Now, I'm not being critical necessarily of this at this stage because, let's face it, Goodwill especially, yes, they get their stuff for free, but there is a cost to that stuff because a ton of that stuff that comes in is just absolute junk, right? There's all kinds of processing that has expense to it and labor expense to it. This is why this, in my opinion, this investment is being made, creating systems to make it easier where the costlier parts of their business, which is going to be labor, are going to be dealt with and possibly turned into profit. Now, we already know the sorting is going on. They're trying to industrialize the sorting, I think, at a higher level so that they can do it quicker, less labor, recycle, maybe even make money off of it, and then make money off of these other companies. Think about this. Patagonia was there, for instance. I have no doubt, because what does Patagonia do with their overstock? They have these outlet stores and whatever. My dad used to work for the magazine distributorship business, and you know this if you're a dumpster diver for all kinds of different companies. They want their stuff destroyed before it goes out there. I mean, Funko Pop threw, however many hundreds of thousands of Funko Pops in the dump or whatever, right? They want to limit what is out there on the secondary markets. And, of course, us resellers live on the secondary markets. I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but I think most of you are getting my point. Where you have these companies that are probably, some of them are welcoming this regulation because it's going to restrict secondary markets in the name of sustainability. So this may not be popular to say, but this is the stuff. This is why I said that regulation and government laws and all kinds of stuff like that are the only big threat to reselling. It's not eBay's glitches. It's not, more expensive yard sales, which, by the way, is another separate point here, where if we're having to sell for a little bit less, then we're either going to stop doing what we're doing or we're going to have to source cheaper. And I'm starting to see signs of that possibly happening. And I don't want to say that's the case, but this year I saw higher garage sale prices than I've ever seen before. But I'm just recently seeing glimpses of, hey, I'm not going to buy it unless it's cheap enough. And then, people have to react to that, and then it just keeps going backwards until, hey, You know, somebody, the source of this stuff's got to get cheaper, but that's neither here nor there. Goodwill makes its money off of all kinds of different ways, but the sorting process is becoming far more important. We already know they do this, and they send this here, and they do recycling with this, and they have buyers for this, and they send this to their website, and they send this to the bins, and they put this in the actual store. We already know that, but it's, in my opinion, it's going to be industrialized at a higher level, and they're going to become an outlet for a lot of other companies, and he started to see that as well. So I just find all this stuff intriguing. I am a little bit afraid of this, but at the same time, you know, you don't panic, and you watch things unfold, and you take the steps that counter it. But one thing we can certainly do is to be very aware of it and vigilant about it, and maybe even talk to our representatives when this stuff comes up, and to have our right to resell things. That's been a big threat that I think's been tamped down a little bit. And those lawsuit stuff that I talked about last year a lot, I've seen a lot less of that stuff on social media, and it's, thank goodness, and we've kind of sounding the alarm on here. So I could go through the rest of this thing. I think I might pick out one or two more points really quickly. Man, it's so hard to pick. There's so many things. Like I said, maybe I should do a dedicated video on this sometime. And some of you may not be interested, but this for not just for thrifters, but even garage sellers. You know, when they start talking about regulation, listen to this. As a society and industry, this is from the CEO of Goodwill. As a society and industry, we need greater visibility, transparency into the global journey of secondhand textiles, increased use of textiles made of recycled material brands, and greater efforts to address the overproduction and overconsumption of garments made of cheap materials. When materials are not designed to last, it is difficult to keep them in circulation and challenging to recycle them. There's a lot to not argue with, but increased efforts to address overproduction and overconsumption, that sounds an awful lot like laws and regulations to me, which is, to me, where we're going to lose a foothold in some of this. And I know it might be, you know, overhype here a little bit, but this is, I'm telling you right now, this is the only threat to reselling. Not this, but regulation for safety, you know, consumer safety. You're seeing it in Europe already. If you're listening in Europe, all the stuff you got to fill out, and the VAT taxes and all this different, you know, all in the name of safety. This is going to all be done in the name of sustainability. But imagine the regulations that go on it and the protection that comes from those regulations for the companies that are already at the top. All right, reading between the lines, one more point here, and then I'll make one last point that's a little bit different. This finding reinforces Goodwill's position, the findings they were talking about here. 60% of material was found to be suitable for existing recycling technologies when they started to do this initiative and testing out different things in the sorting process and how much of the bulk that they get in that they can actually recycle. They said 60% of it, which, by the way, they're doing a lot of shipping of this stuff all over the place, overseas. All the recycling stuff that was being sent to China, all that stuff, there wasn't an infrastructure in place for it. So a lot of folks would put their stuff in recycling things, not clothing at this point, but all over the place. And then it ended up in the dump anyways. But at this point, these recycling hubs in different places are becoming bigger, and they're becoming more effective in processing more of this stuff. That's a little bit of a side note here. But this finding reinforces Goodwill's position as a key player and feedstock supplier, meaning they're getting all the stuff that's donated to them, supplier in the emerging textile recycling ecosystem. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It is a good thing. The bad part of it is, at some point, they're going to want this regulation to take place so that things can be processed through their plants. And that's like, whew, man. We're creating an infrastructure for the regulation as opposed to creating an infrastructure for profit reasons. We're doing it for a reason that is beneficial to them. Now, I believe that Goodwill is doing it for both of these reasons, because recycling is going to be extremely beneficial to them. We all know this, right? All the people say, oh, you can't find anything at Goodwill if you're poor or whatever. There's so much more than people could possibly buy out of the Goodwill. It ends up going in the dump. It ends up going in the bins. But where do you think stuff goes when it doesn't go to the bins? I mean, there's just so much out there. Before I get to the last point, I've just started to dabble in cleanouts and buyouts and storage units. And so I feel the pain of somebody like Goodwill in a sense, and you folks out there who do this stuff, there's so much that, you know, I love picking, right? Going and seeing all this stuff and you just pick a few things. That's the sorting is going on right there, and you don't bring a bunch of junk back to your house. So I do get this. Let me read this part right here. It furthers our goal of finding the highest, this is from Preston here. It furthers our goal of finding the highest and best use for donated goods. And they say in another part, I couldn't find it here, but you know, that reuse is obviously the highest good. It takes less energy. I mean, it takes energy to recycle, right? And so if the benefit is worse than, you know, if you're burning coal or whatever it is you're doing in order to recycle these things, you know, for the folks that are concerned about the sustainability, in some cases it's far worse than the actual recycling itself. But I don't want to get into that argument. But they talk about reuse. And of course, Goodwill, this is their job. When he says what is the terminology here? It furthers our goal of finding the highest and best use for donated goods. I could read between those lines right there. This is not some altruistic statement that stands alone. It is in their economic best interest to find the what is it again? I keep losing it. The highest and best use for donated goods. Obviously, if it can be reused and resold as a garment, as whatever it is, and this, we're just talking about textiles at this point, but it's going to go further than that, of course, I think in the coming decades. There is a huge benefit in the sorting process, and if you can sort like low end, I mean, it's like a bacon, right? It's like a pig, you know, the highest use, best money for this, you know, the Canadian bacon or whatever you get, and then you get the pickled pig's feet, right? This is what we're talking about, and that's wonderful stuff. That's free market stuff. But I think they're twisting two things together to an economic benefit for them that I think is a little bit disingenuous here. The highest use for donated goods. You know, what's going to make us the most money can also coincide with all that stuff. But what does that mean for us, right? What does that mean? Do they go immediately? Does all clothing immediately go to a place and get sorted? Does it get sorted right there? Stuff end up on the shelves, get shipped? Are we going to see more bin stuff where the sorting is done by you? I mean, that's why you're paying so little. You're doing their job for them, right? You roll out the bins and you guys sort it out. And whatever's left is worthless because we just had 50 people look through it all. So it's just an interesting twist that I never really would have thought Goodwill would be investing $2 million into the process and then becoming a player in the recycling of it as well. So we will see. We will see. Thank y'all for joining us, and I can't wait to see you next time.